Chapter 8, Video 1. We're going to talk about rhythms that originate in the atrial, or in the atrium. Atrial rhythms originate in one or more irritable foci in the atria. They depolarize the atria and then they head down the pathway of conduction to the ventricles. When we read this, I want you to understand what foci means. F-O-C-I. Foci means locations. So with atrial rhythms, they can originate in one or more irritable areas of the atria, okay? Atrial rhythms are also called ectopic rhythms. Ectopic rhythms originate in other areas, but not the sinus node. So when we think about the atrial rhythms here, even though the sinus node is in the atrium, these rhythms are originating in different places in the atriums, not the sinus node. So hence they're called atrial rhythms, okay? The word atrial rhythms, the atrium is actually another pacemaker of the heart, okay? Usually they're rapid rhythms that usurp the sinus rhythm. And remember, we talked about the term usurp or usurpation. That means to take over. So these rhythms tend to be rapid and they take over the sinus rhythm, okay? Occasionally they'll be slow, but usually they're fast. The treatment, we're going to aim the treatment at returning to normal sinus rhythm or slowing the heart rate to a more tolerable rate. They're extremely variable in presentation, and these rhythms some atrial rhythms are regular and others are completely irregular. They tend to be chaotic. The atrium is not technically known as the pacemaker of the heart, but it's known to usurp the sinus rhythm, okay? So remember, usurp is to take control. Again, these rhythms are usually rapid because the heart rate's rapid. These patients tend to be symptomatic. Moving forward, most rhythms again are rapid. Few are slower. There's a set of criteria here that it goes with the atrial rhythm. You must know this set of criteria to distinguish between the atrial rhythms. Remember, atrial rhythms can have positive QRSs or negative QRSs depending on the lead that's being monitored. So an example of this is lead 2 would be a positive QRS, but lead V1 would be a negative QRS. So I'm going to want you to go back and review that as well when we're talking about atrial rhythms. But the atrial rhythms have multiple and variable possible criteria. The P waves can be matching upright. They're usually greater than 160 at rest, or you may have no P waves. The P waves may look like sawtooths. They can be different shapes. So there's different criteria that goes with the atrial rhythms. The conduction system of the atrium. So basically we have the atrium here, and this is just kind of showing you, we have our sinus node up here, but with the atrial, with a single atrial foci, like a single location, this area right here is your sinus node. But over here, you'll see this is the area of foci. So we have a single irritable area here. So we have a single foci. This area that you see right here is in the top part of the heart. It's in the atrium, but this area is irritated and it's taken over this. So the pathway of electrical impulse is starting here and then traveling down to the AV node. So you'll see this is a single area of foci. That P wave may be deformed, but it's going to look the same across the strip. And the reason it looks the same is we only have one area that's irritated. So the P wave may look deformed, but it's going to look the same across the strip and that tells us when it looks the same that we have one area that's irritated. However, flipping on over, this is a multi-atrial foci, so there's multiple areas here that are in the heart that's irritated. So you have 3 areas in this picture being depicted. These 3 areas are the irritable areas. they have usurped. They've taken over this sinus node that normally produces a perfect heart rhythm. They've trumped that. They've taken it over and they said, we don't want you to work, but we're going to work. But we have 3 different locations here that are irritated by this slide. Now, with these 3 different locations, we may have P waves that look different, okay? So this P wave may look one way, this P wave may look another way, and this one may look another way. So you'll see your P waves, but all your P waves will look different. And that tells you, when the P waves are looking different, that you have a multi-atrial foci. And remember, with the P waves are showing you, and they're indicative of what's going on in the atrium. So the P waves represent the atrium. Now, before we get started with the next video, I just wanted to give you a brief overview of that. So understand what we mean by the atrial rhythms and the criteria for the atrial rhythms, because as we move forward in the next videos, we're going to talk about the different rhythms associated with the atrium. If you have any questions, please let me know.